My name is Sabrina Collins. I'm 22 years old, and I honestly hadn't planned on moving back in with my parents. But there I was, suitcase in hand, standing on the same cracked concrete driveway where I'd learned how to ride a bike, where I'd waited for college acceptance letters, where I'd once promised myself I would never come back unless it was on my terms. Life has a sense of humor like that. The job hunt hadn't taken long. Within a week, I landed a position at Reynolds Marketing Group. Solid salary, performance bonuses, actual upward mobility. It felt like the first real proof that all those years of grinding through scholarships and late-night studying had meant something. That night, over Mom's pot roast, the same recipe she'd been making since I was 8, I shared my plan. "I'm thinking I'll stay about 3 months," I said casually, cutting into my potatoes. "Save up a cushion, then get a place downtown." The clinking of forks stopped. Mom and Dad exchanged one of those looks. The ones that always meant a storm was coming, even if the sky still looked clear. "Moving out?" Mom repeated slowly, setting her fork down. "Sabrina," Dad added, clearing his throat, that warning sound I knew too well. "You know your mother can only work part-time at the clinic because of her hip. And there have been rumors of layoffs at the distribution center," Mom continued softly. "Things aren't stable right now." I stared at my plate. "We could really use your help with the bills," she added. "And you wouldn't have to pay rent here. It just makes more sense." It wasn't a request. It was a conclusion they'd already drawn. I felt the walls inch closer. They had a point, sort of. And they were my parents. "I guess I could stay longer," I heard myself say. And just like that, the decision was made. Life settled into a routine. I worked, I paid the utilities, I bought groceries, Mom cooked dinner, Dad watched the news. It almost felt peaceful until last weekend. That was when my older sister, Victoria Collins, swept back into town with her husband, Derek Morgan, and their 2 children, 5-year-old Harper and 3-year-old Mason. The transformation in my parents was immediate. Like someone had flipped a switch. "Oh, my precious angels," Mom squealed, scooping Harper into her arms. Dad hoisted Mason onto his shoulders. "Victoria, sweetheart, you look radiant," Mom gushed. "How's everything? Tell us everything." I stood in the doorway, watching. They circled around her like she was the sun, and they were helplessly caught in orbit. They asked about her garden, her yoga class, Mason's new vocabulary, Harper's preschool art projects. They had never asked me about my campaign metrics. Not when I made Dean's List, not when I won the Business School Innovation Award, not when I graduated debt-free. "Sabrina, be a dear and put on some coffee," Mom called over her shoulder, not even looking at me. Standing in the kitchen, listening to their laughter spill into the hallway, I felt that old familiar sensation. Invisible. Victoria had always been the star of our family show, 7 years older. Beautiful in that sharp, commanding way that filled rooms. The one teachers adored. The one neighbors bragged about. I remembered being 11, sitting at this very table, holding out my straight-A report card. "That's nice, Sabrina," Mom had said absent-mindedly, still on the phone with Victoria, discussing MBA applications. "Victoria, honey, which programs are your top choices?" Everything revolved around her. When she got into Northwestern University, Mom cried at dinner. "We'll make it work, won't we, Richard?" she'd said. Dad nodded solemnly. Our Victoria deserves the best. They took out loans, tightened budgets. A week after Victoria left for Chicago, they sat me down. "We need to tighten our belts," Dad had said. "The loan payments are significant." Translation: there would be no safety net for me. While classmates upgraded phones yearly, I kept my flip phone until it physically cracked in half. New clothes came from Goodwill. Christmas gifts were practical, but checks kept going to Chicago. "Your sister needs to focus," Mom would say. I learned early, if I wanted something, I would earn it alone. At 15, I joined every academic club possible. I wrote scholarship essays until my wrists ached. It paid off. Full scholarship to State University. When I told them they wouldn't have to pay a dime, the relief on their faces was unmistakable. Relief, not pride. Meanwhile, Victoria graduated, married Derek, her college sweetheart, and produced 2 perfect children within 2 years. Their golden family. And now, here they were, back in my childhood living room, laughing, Planning. And before I even sat down properly, Victoria said lightly, "Sabrina, you'll watch Harper and Mason Saturday while Derek and I go antiquing, right?" Not a question. An assumption. I forced a smile. "Maybe Mom and Dad—" "Oh, honey," Mom interrupted, rubbing her hip. "It's hard for me to keep up with little ones. And your father needs rest on weekends," she added. So that Saturday, I watched Moana for the 100th time, while Harper sang along and Mason attempted to color on my bedroom wall. Victoria and Derek were at brunch. My parents were gardening. I told myself it was just one weekend a month, just one. But deep down, something unsettled me, because this didn't feel temporary. It felt familiar, like a script I'd been cast in years ago and never asked if I wanted the role. And I had the uneasy feeling that this time, the role was about to get much bigger. A year passed in that rhythm. One weekend a month turned into an unspoken obligation. I paid the electric bill, I paid the water bill, I paid for groceries. Victoria breezed in with her curated life and breezed out again, leaving glitter, juice boxes, and exhaustion behind. I almost convinced myself it was manageable. Then came the phone call. I was at the sink rinsing dishes when I heard Mom answer in the living room. "Victoria? Sweetheart, what's wrong?" There was sobbing on the other end. Loud, desperate, theatrical sobbing. I dried my hands slowly and stepped closer, though I already knew. Derek's tech startup had collapsed. Investors pulled out. Payroll missed. Office shut down. "They can't afford rent," Mom whispered to Dad, covering the phone receiver. And then, without even glancing toward the kitchen, "Of course you can move in. We'll make room." My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. I stepped into the doorway. If they're moving in, maybe this would be a good time for me to get my own place. You would have thought I'd suggested demolishing the house. "Sabrina, don't be ridiculous," Mom snapped. "There's plenty of room for everyone," Dad added firmly. "We're family. We stick together during hard times." Hard times, the words echoed. 3 cars arrived the following weekend, loaded with furniture, toys, framed photos, and decorative baskets labeled things like Harper's Art Supplies and Mason's Special Blankets. It felt less like guests arriving and more like an invasion. By Saturday afternoon, I was moving my belongings into what used to be the storage room. It was barely big enough for a twin bed and a narrow dresser. My old bedroom, the one I'd grown up in, the one twice the size, became the kids' playroom. "The children need space," Victoria said brightly, as she directed Derek to position a plastic kitchen set where my desk used to be. I stood there holding a box of my college textbooks, trying to swallow the bitterness crawling up my throat. Harper and Mason treated the house like an amusement park. They ran up and down the hallway screaming, slamming doors, knocking into walls. Victoria parked herself on the couch with HGTV blasting at full volume. "I just need something light," she'd sigh dramatically. "This transition is so hard." Derek spent his days job hunting at the kitchen table, scrolling LinkedIn with furrowed brows. "The market's brutal," he'd say gravely, "but I'm sure something will come through." Meanwhile, the first utility bill after they moved in arrived like a punch to the face. Double. Water nearly tripled. Electricity spiked. Gas soared. I stared at the numbers in the kitchen under the yellow overhead light, my heart racing. My savings plan evaporated in seconds. At dinner that night, I cleared my throat. "So, about the bills." Victoria's fork paused midair. "They've doubled," I said carefully. "I can't keep covering everything alone. It's almost my entire paycheck now." The silence was immediate and heavy. "Are you seriously complaining about money right now?" Victoria snapped. "I'm not complaining. I just think we need to figure out something fair." "Unbelievable," she cut in. "Derek and I just lost everything." Mom reached for Victoria's hand. "Family helps family," she said softly. Dad nodded. "This isn't the time to count pennies." "Count pennies." I looked down at my spaghetti, appetite gone. The words I wanted to say burned inside my chest. "You didn't hesitate to count pennies when it was me." But I swallowed them. "Never mind," I murmured. That night, lying in my shoebox of a bedroom, I stared at the ceiling inches above my face. I started doing mental math. If I stopped paying utilities, if I cut grocery contributions, if I moved out now, The numbers almost worked. Almost. A week later, Derek landed a job at an insurance company. Lower pay, but stable. I let myself believe things might stabilize. I was wrong. It's so hard being alone with the kids all day, Victoria began almost immediately. Derek leaves at 8. He doesn't get back until 6. I never get a break. The small favors started the next morning. Sabrina, can you watch them while I run to Whole Foods? Just an hour. Then, can you keep an eye on them while I take a bath? Then, Derek and I are meeting friends for dinner. You don't mind, right? It happened so gradually, I almost didn't see the pattern forming. Until one Thursday evening, I walked in from work to find Victoria already dressed in heels and lipstick. "Oh, good, you're home," she said, grabbing her purse. "They've had snacks. Dinner in an hour. We'll be back by 10. The door closed before I responded. I stood there in my blazer and flats while Harper tugged my sleeve asking for juice. Weekends became worse. Victoria and Derek would casually announce plans Friday night. Lunch with friends. Movie date. Shopping. Mom and Dad conveniently started visiting relatives on Saturdays. So there I'd be, chicken nuggets in the oven. Paw Patrol on repeat. Mason crying because I cut his sandwich into squares instead of triangles. By Sunday night, I was drained beyond language, and I still cooked dinner for 6. One evening, after Mason threw a tantrum over bath time, and Harper colored on the hallway wall, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened a blank document on my laptop. I started typing numbers. My salary. Rent estimates. Security deposit. Groceries. Utilities. For the first time, I stopped calculating how to help them and started calculating how to leave. The thought scared me, but it also did something else. It made me feel awake. Derek's new insurance job was supposed to fix things. That's what I told myself the first Monday he left the house in a stiff new button-down, tie slightly crooked, determination written across his face. "First day," he said, forcing a smile. "Fresh start." Victoria kissed his cheek like they were starring in a commercial about resilience. I stood behind them, holding Mason's spilled cereal bowl. Fresh start for them, not for me. Because by Wednesday, the small favors had already doubled. "It's so hard being alone with the kids all day," Victoria sighed dramatically while scrolling her phone. "You have no idea how exhausting motherhood is." She said this to me. The person who had been making their lunches, scrubbing crayon off walls, and mediating toy disputes every evening after working a full-time job. That afternoon it was, "Can you watch them while I take a quick shower?" An hour later, she was still upstairs, blow-drying her hair. The following day it was, "I just need to run to Target." She came back with throw pillows and a candle that smelled like eucalyptus in denial. By Friday, the requests weren't even framed as requests anymore. I walked in from work to find Victoria already dressed, makeup flawless, heels clicking against the hardwood. "Oh good, you're home," she said briskly. "Derek and I are meeting some friends downtown. Kids already had snacks. Dinner in an hour. Love you." The door closed before I could answer. Harper looked up at me from the living room floor. "Mommy said you'll read me 3 stories tonight." Of course she did. Weekends became something I dreaded with a physical ache. Saturday mornings, I'd wake up already tense. Victoria and Derek would announce plans like they were discussing the weather. Brunch. Antique fair. Dinner party. Mom would rub her hip and sigh. "Oh, honey, I wish I could help more, but my hip's been acting up." Dad would nod solemnly from behind his newspaper. And just like that, I was assigned. Chicken nuggets. Juice spills. Endless Disney soundtracks bleeding through thin walls. I started noticing something. My parents never stepped in unless it was to praise Victoria. "Parenting is the hardest job in the world," Mom would murmur admiringly, while Victoria described her exhaustion. But when I mentioned being tired, "Well, this is good practice," Mom said one night at dinner. I looked up. "Practice? For when you have children someday," she added lightly. "Consider it training." Training. Like I was an intern in my own life. Victoria smirked into her wine glass. I set my fork down carefully. "I didn't agree to this," I said quietly. "I'm exhausted. I work all week and then I'm doing childcare every weekend. This isn't working for me." Victoria's head snapped up. "What do you mean it's not working? Are you saying you don't want to spend time with your niece and nephew?" "That's not what I said." Wow, she scoffed. I can't believe how selfish you're being. Mom immediately reached over and patted Victoria's hand. Don't worry, honey. Sabrina just doesn't understand yet. Understand what? That my time didn't matter? That my weekends were communal property? Dad cleared his throat. Family makes sacrifices. I stared at my plate. They weren't listening. They never listened. After that conversation, something shifted, not in them, in me. I stopped arguing, stopped defending myself, stopped trying to explain. Instead, I started observing. I noticed how quickly Victoria handed over responsibility, how easily my parents deferred to her comfort, how Derek avoided eye contact whenever plans were announced, as if he knew but didn't want to be involved. One Tuesday at work, my friend Amanda leaned against my cubicle wall. You look like you haven't slept in weeks. I haven't, I muttered. She grinned. Then you need this. Aspen Ridge, ski weekend. Just a quick getaway. Saturday to Sunday. Perfect slopes right now. For a second, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Excitement. Freedom. Cold air against my cheeks. Silence that wasn't filled with cartoons. I'm in, I said, before I could talk myself out of it. That Friday evening, I was in my tiny storage room bedroom, folding my thickest sweater into a duffel bag. For once, I felt light. Like maybe I wasn't trapped. Like maybe I still had choices. Victoria appeared in my doorway. What are you doing? She asked, eyes narrowing at the half-packed bag. Packing, I said calmly. Ski trip, Aspen Ridge. Leaving tomorrow morning. Her expression changed instantly. Not confusion, calculation. You need to cancel. I blinked. I'm sorry? She crossed her arms. Derek and I are going to Aunt Patricia's 60th birthday party in Riverside. Mom and Dad are coming too. You need to stay and watch Harper and Mason. For a moment, I actually thought she was joking. Then I saw her face. She wasn't. You didn't tell me about any party, I said slowly. We all discussed it. We? Mom, Dad, Derek, and me. Without me. And they'd already assigned my role. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was absurd. You're joking, I said. I'm not, she snapped. You're being completely unreasonable. I zipped my duffel bag. No. What's unreasonable is assuming I'll cancel my plans because you forgot to plan childcare. Her face flushed red. This is family. And I am family too, I replied. Her mouth opened, then closed. She turned and stormed down the hallway. Mom, Dad, Derek, you won't believe what Sabrina is doing. I stood there, heart pounding, not with fear, with something else. Resolve. The thundering footsteps coming toward my room felt different this time, because for the first time in years, I wasn't backing down. The hallway filled with footsteps, not hurried, not confused, purposeful. Victoria entered first, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with indignation. Derek followed, jaw tight. My parents came last, their presence heavy, authoritative, familiar. My tiny storage room bedroom suddenly felt even smaller. What's this about you going skiing? Mom demanded, hands planted on her hips. Exactly what it sounds like, I replied evenly. I'm going to Aspen Ridge tomorrow with friends. Victoria let out a sharp breath. You can't. I slung my duffel bag onto the bed and faced them fully. Why? Because, she said, crossing her arms. We're going to Aunt Patricia's birthday party. No kids allowed. Mom and Dad are coming too. You're staying here. Not asking. Assigning. I looked from her to Mom to Dad. No one corrected her. So you all discussed this, I said slowly, without me, and decided what I'd be doing with my weekend. Dad shifted slightly. It was the most practical arrangement, he muttered. Practical. For them. Victoria and Derek deserve a break, Mom added. They've been through so much. And I haven't? I asked quietly. Victoria scoffed. Oh, please. You work a desk job. The room went silent. I felt something inside me click into place. I work full time, I said carefully. I pay every utility bill in this house. I buy most of the groceries. And I spend nearly every weekend watching your children. They're your niece and nephew, Mom snapped. You should want to help. I have helped, I replied. for over a year. Derek finally spoke up, his voice low but edged. We can't afford a babysitter right now. That's unfortunate, I said, but it's not my responsibility. Victoria's eyes widened as if I'd insulted her personally. You are being unbelievably selfish. Selfish. That word again, the word they used anytime I didn't fold immediately. Dad shook his head slowly. Family makes sacrifices. Yes, I agreed. And I've been the only one making them. The silence thickened. Victoria's voice turned shrill. You're really going to ruin this for everyone? I'm not ruining anything, I said. You are responsible for your children. If the party doesn't allow kids, then you either don't go or you hire someone. With what money? She shot back. I met her gaze evenly. Not my problem. The air felt charged. Mom's face hardened. If you walk out that door tomorrow, she said, her voice cold and deliberate, don't bother coming back. There it was. The ultimatum, the moment designed to snap me back into place. For a second, I felt the old instinct rising, the urge to apologize, to smooth things over, to shrink. Instead, I laughed, not hysterically, not bitterly, just honestly. They stared at me like I'd lost my mind. You know what's funny? I said, wiping a tear from my eye. I've been wanting to move out for months. I just didn't have the courage. Victoria blinked. Mom's jaw tightened. So, thank you, I continued calmly, for making this easy. I pulled out my phone and dialed Amanda. I put it on speaker. Hey, I said lightly, that offer to stay at your place, still good? Maybe longer than just skiing? Amanda didn't hesitate. Of course, spare room's yours. Want to come tonight? Yes, I said, I'll be there in 20 minutes. The room went still. They had expected tears, begging, compliance, not this. I moved efficiently after that. Clothes, laptop, passport, important documents, childhood photo album I didn't even know why I still had. They watched me carry boxes down the hallway. No one tried to stop me. No one offered to help. When the trunk of my car was finally full, I walked back into the living room where they stood clustered together. Oh, one more thing, I said calmly. They looked at me warily now. Since I won't be living here anymore, I won't be paying the bills either. Mom's face drained of color. But the utilities, the groceries. I shrugged lightly. Not my problem. The words tasted unfamiliar, but powerful. Victoria opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Derek looked suddenly nervous. Dad's posture stiffened, but he didn't speak. I turned and walked toward the door. Sabrina, Mom called sharply. For a split second, I paused. Old habits. Then I kept walking. The night air hit my face like freedom. As I pulled out of the driveway, my phone began lighting up. Call after call. Text after text. I can't believe you. Mom, you're tearing this family apart. Dad, we need to discuss this calmly. I ignored them all. The further I drove, the lighter my chest felt. It wasn't just about skiing anymore. It was about breathing. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating what everyone else needed from me. I was choosing myself. And that terrified them. Because the moment I stopped being their safety net, they had to stand on their own. The next morning, Amanda and I drove to Aspen Ridge with the windows cracked just enough to let cold mountain air rush in. For the first time in months, my phone wasn't sitting face up beside me like a ticking bomb. It was buried in my duffel bag on silent. The sky was painfully blue. The mountains were capped in white. The world felt wide in a way my childhood house never had. On the slopes, I fell twice, laughed 3 times harder, and felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for years. We drank hot chocolate by the fire that night, our cheeks red from windburn. You look different, Amanda said, studying me. Different how? Like you can breathe. I smiled into my cup. I think I finally can. When we drove back Sunday evening, exhaustion settled into my bones, but it was clean exhaustion. The kind that came from living, not enduring. That night, sitting cross-legged on Amanda's guest bed, I opened my laptop and started searching for apartments. With my entire paycheck no longer funding 4 additional adults and 2 children, the numbers shifted dramatically. Security deposit? Manageable. Rent? affordable. Utilities? Normal. By Wednesday, I signed a lease for a small, bright one-bedroom, 15 minutes from Reynolds Marketing. The first morning in my new apartment felt unreal. Silence. No cartoons blaring, no tiny feet pounding down the hallway, no heavy sigh from Mom as she set plates on the table. I made coffee, sat on the couch, and drank it while it was still hot. That had never happened before. The messages kept coming. I didn't answer the calls, but I read the texts. Mom, how could you abandon us like this? Victoria, the kids keep asking where Aunt Sabrina is. Dad, your mother is very upset. This isn't how we raised you. Derek, we're struggling more than you know. The pattern was predictable. Guilt, anger, shame, desperation. I didn't respond. My silence unsettled them more than any argument could have. After a week, Mom called again. I don't know what made me answer. Maybe curiosity, maybe closure. Sabrina, she snapped the second I picked up. I can't believe you ruined our entire weekend. Aunt Patricia's party was completely disrupted because Victoria and Derek couldn't attend. I closed my eyes. Mom, stop. Don't you dare. No, I said firmly. You stop. There was a pause. I had never interrupted her before. I am done being treated like unpaid staff in my own family, I continued. I'm done being the wallet, the babysitter, the backup plan. You're being dramatic, she scoffed. No, I'm being honest. Silence again. Then her voice softened into that familiar, manipulative sweetness. Honey, we need you. The bills this month. And there it was. Not, we miss you. Not, we're sorry. The bills. I'm not coming back, I said evenly. Maybe someday we can have a relationship, but it will be on equal terms. No guilt, no ultimatums, no expectations that I'll sacrifice my life. You're tearing this family apart, she whispered. No, I replied. I'm just not holding it together anymore. I hung up. Then I blocked her number. Dad's. Victoria's. Even Derek's. I blocked them on social media too. It felt drastic and terrifying, but also necessary. For a few nights, I lay awake staring at my new ceiling, wondering if I'd made a mistake. There's a grief that comes not from losing people, but from realizing they were never who you hoped they'd be. I wasn't just grieving my family. I was grieving the version of them I had imagined. 3 months passed. 3 months of decorating my apartment exactly how I wanted. Minimalist furniture, plants in every window, art that made me feel something. 3 months of Wednesday yoga classes, of reading entire books uninterrupted, of saying yes to dinner invitations without calculating childcare schedules. At work, something shifted too. Without constant exhaustion weighing me down, I focused differently, strategized more sharply, spoke up in meetings. 2 weeks ago, my boss called me into his office. Senior account manager, he said, sliding paperwork across the desk. You've earned it. I walked back to my cubicle in a daze. It wasn't just the promotion. It was the clarity. I had never been incapable. I had just been drained. Last week, Amanda dragged me to a gallery opening downtown. That's where I met Connor Hayes, graphic designer, dark hair, soft laugh. We ended up standing in front of the same abstract painting, arguing about what it meant. We talked for 2 hours about books, about travel, about childhood expectations. When he asked for my number, I didn't hesitate. We're getting coffee Saturday, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about something that belongs only to me. 3 months ago, I drove away from my parents' house with everything I owned crammed into the back of my car. 3 months later, I barely recognized the girl who used to lie awake in that storage room bedroom, counting utility bills in her head. My apartment smells like vanilla and fresh laundry. There's a tall snake plant by the window that somehow hasn't died under my care. A framed abstract print above the couch. A bookshelf that holds novels I chose, not hand-me-downs, not leftovers from someone else's life. Silence still surprises me sometimes. I wake up on Saturdays without dread sitting heavy on my chest. No one bursts through my door demanding juice. No one announces plans that automatically include my unpaid labor. I make pancakes if I feel like it. or I don't. It's the freedom of choice that feels almost radical. Connor and I had coffee last Saturday. It was supposed to last an hour. It lasted 3. He asked about my family, carefully, like he could sense there was a fracture line there. I'm taking some space, I told him simply. He didn't press. Instead, he said, that takes courage. Courage. No one at work, my promotion has settled into something steady and real. I manage my own accounts now. I mentor a junior associate. My ideas are heard instead of spoken over. Sometimes I wonder who I might have become sooner if I hadn't been carrying everyone else. Through the neighborhood grapevine, courtesy of a high school friend who still lives near my parents, I learned what happened after I left. The kids are in daycare. Victoria went back to work part-time. Mom or Dad picked up overtime shifts. They're just like they would have had to if I'd never existed as their financial safety net. That realization didn't feel vindictive. It felt clarifying. They didn't need me. They needed what I provided. There's a difference. Last Tuesday, I was sitting in a coffee shop working on a campaign draft when a woman with 2 small children sat down at the table beside me. The kids were loud, knocking over napkin dispensers, demanding snacks, arguing over a tablet. The woman looked exhausted. For a split second, I felt that old reflex. The urge to help, to step in, to make myself useful. It was automatic, like muscle memory. I could have offered to entertain them, could have handed over my phone with a game on it, could have sacrificed my quiet hour to ease her burden. Instead, I paused, took a slow sip of my latte, and went back to my laptop. Her children. Her responsibility, not mine. That boundary felt small on the outside, but inside, it was monumental. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about them. I wonder if Harper asks about me, if Mason remembers the way I used to cut his sandwiches into squares. I wonder if Mom ever replays that ultimatum in her mind. If she regrets it, if Dad does. I don't hate them. That might be easier. Hate is loud. This is quieter. It's the acceptance that I was never going to be valued in that house the way I deserved, and I'm no longer willing to shrink myself to fit into someone else's expectations. Maybe one day there will be a conversation, a real one. Not about bills, not about babysitting, not about sacrifice, about respect, about balance, about choice, or maybe there won't. Either way, I'm done being invisible. I'm done being the family ATM. I'm done being the automatic solution to problems I didn't create. I'm done being the backup plan. I'm 22 years old. I have a career I earned. An apartment that feels like mine. A man who looks at me like I'm interesting, not convenient. Friends who invite me places because they want me there, not because they need something. For the first time in my life, I wake up excited about what the day might hold. And that feeling? It's worth more than every pot roast dinner, every guilt trip, every forced sacrifice I ever endured in that house. I chose myself, and I'm finally, unapologetically happy.